Sometimes opposition doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you've stepped into something that matters. In this episode of Off Topic On Point, we talk about what to do when you meant well and it still went wrong. Not from fear, not from defense, but from clarity, composure, and identity. Let's talk about it. Have you ever done something with the right heart, the right process, and still found yourself in trouble? Great resistance, absolute misunderstanding, or pushback you simply did not see coming. This episode is for all the people who really meant well and still found themselves in a fight they never started. Today we're talking about what to do when opposition finds you, not because you were reckless, not because you meant to do something wrong, but because life, leadership, and people are complex. So I am again joined by my favorite friends in the world from across the world, Dr. J and Pastor C. This is also our first episode for the year. Shall we jump in?
So good to be back. We're looking forward to another great year. It's going to be an awesome one with all of you.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to it and to spending time with everyone. Off topic, but definitely on point.
Well, as usual, we have a plan, but the plan can go wherever it needs to go. So before we jump in, I just want to be clear about what this is not. This is not us playing victim. I am not opening this space for you to say I was a victim situation. We are not blaming anyone. This is also not about justifying poor behavior. It is about discernment. It's about what happens when intention and outcome don't match. And the question then is, how do we respond without losing ourselves, without losing our dignity, and sometimes without losing the relationship? Because that's pretty important, I think. Opposition doesn't always mean that you're doing the wrong thing, but opposition always reveals something about you, about the person, about the situation, about your understanding. So all of that said, could either of you share a time when you were genuinely, you meant well, and still you were in hot water, you were in trouble, or you met serious resistance?
I'll probably start if I may. I'll give you a recent one, close to home. So end of last year, we had a storm at our house or in the area, and obviously our house was affected, and we lost the entire living areas, ceilings, kitchen, everything just came down. Long story short, insurance sent out repair guys to come through. And being a hands-on person, and always willing to help, I thought I'll be on site with the contractors. And as I started getting going, I would advise them on certain things that they're missing out on some of the tools that they had, and they maybe not seeing all of the areas that they had to fix. So I just gave my advice and got involved. And the site foreman was quite happy, but when I spoke to the boss later the afternoon, he was less pleased, and he told me to rather mind my own business and stop interfering with his guys and keeping them out of work and missing the deadline. And I explained to him, listen, fair enough, I'll do that, but it's easier to fix a problem right now. I mean, I come from construction, so I understand some of the things. And if there's a mistake now, just fix it now, then waiting until everything is done, the paint is dry, and now you want to come back and fix it. And he's like, no, we'll fix it afterwards. And we got into an interesting disagreement that lasted throughout Christmas into the new year, and they had to come and fix it a couple of times. And all I wanted to do was just simply say, listen, I am here, I'm seeing the mistakes, just fix it. And it turned up into one big argument. And I realized, that sometimes you should just, mind your own business. But then again, when it's close to home and it's personally, I also want to feel that I have the freedom to at least discuss, the problems at hand. But there's multiple times that I've seen in my life that you put your feet in that hot water, and it was clearly just you there to help and you're there to assist. And so what I've learned over the years is just to understand where is those frameworks or the the guidelines in which you play, and then you play within those guidelines.
Pastor I'd
I
love to
think
know.
that
Dr. J, go.
I wanted to say that I think that opposition doesn't always mean that you are wrong. It just means that you've stepped into something that actually means something. And that's why it becomes so hard. It's like, that's why there's that friction. You wanted to
Absolutely.
say, Odette?
I wanted to ask Pastor C, which part of that whole situation caught you off guard?
I think it's the lack of preparedness from the contractor side. Rocking up here with hardly any tools. They're supposed to fix a ceiling, and they don't even have step ladders. They don't have the tools to put in the ceiling. Not enough manpower, 3 guys can't carry a 6-meter ceiling board and, put it in and drill in the nails. That was the first thing. Secondly, the lack of communication between the contractor and obviously the owner, and then the insurance company and the assessor. So I think those were absolutely the 2 main things that caught me off guard, and hence, coming to the rescue. Like, I'm here. I'm more than willing to help. One thing that I have learned, and like as Dr. Janine said, opposition, doesn't always challenge that, but it brings that clarity. And what I've realized is I'll step back, but then when it's my time to give my 5 cents, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to then tell you exactly what I'm not happy with, because you told me, step back, allow me to do what I need to do. Where many times I would have taken a victim mentality in like, oh, shucks, I overstepped my boundaries and I'm so sorry, and, wasn't my place and I shouldn't have done that. And then people just walk all over you because now you've apologized and you've taken the back seat. Where I've realized in times that, yes, if I maybe did something that, was not what you expected, and, unfortunately I've overstepped some boundaries, I'll step back, but then I'll stand my ground on where I need to be. Because, like I said, too many times throughout my life, I've taken that victim mentality where now you're sorry, and then next time you don't want to. And that's exactly what people then expect you is to stand up and to say what you need to say. I do think if you want to be at the forefront of what's happening, there's going to be times when you're going to step on toes. I'll give you the second example that I recently spoke to a coaching client, and, he was very hesitant of confrontation within the firm. And so we used this analogy where this person was engaged, and I asked him if he ever danced with his fiance. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, do you sometimes step on her toes? He's like, all the time. I'm like, and what happens then? Do you stop dancing completely, or does she help you where to step and how to move? And it's like, oh, exactly. And I'm like, well, start dancing in the office. You're going to step on some toes, not on purpose, but you're still finding your feet and you understand where the boundaries are. And so many times people completely just back off. And what I've seen in my personal life is it creates this victim mentality, which is not good for either the company you work for plus yourself.
That's really good advice. That's really good. Because I normally see these 3 things happening. People react emotionally, or they retreat, they pull away. You also mentioned that used to be something that you do, so you pull away. Or I like to obviously respond instead of react, but do so intentionally. From my experience, only one of those 3 moves you forward, and that is the responding intentionally to the situation. So that was really 3 very good truths, Pastor C. I like that. Level-headed truths.
Yeah, it comes from years of challenges and, like I said, that mindset that you create.
I love what you said, Pastor C. You said, okay, cool. I'm going to keep quiet now. And then just now, I'm going to meet you there. It's the typical South African thing. I think it's cultural. I think often the hardest part is to decide, do I justify? Do I explain? Or do I just withdraw? And I think it depends on the situation. I think this is where discernment comes in. Yes, be intentional. Sometimes you need to justify. Sometimes you need to keep quiet and let Rome burn. And other times you need to be dogged about it and say, hell no, this is the thing. The interesting is that it's not a one size fits all. So I can't give you a formula to say this is how you must do it, because there actually isn't a formula. It's about understanding who you are working with and reading the room. I'd love to know from both of you, in instances like that, what is your first instinct? Not your logical response, but your first instinct. Is it to defend? Is it to withdraw? Is it to push back, or do you shut down? And what have you done with that?
I think I can answer that in the sense of that when opposition finds you, most of the time my first instinct is to defend, and it's to defend these two things. Defend my heart because I meant well. And secondly, after that, when the emotions simmer down a little bit, the reputation. So I don't always do. I want to clarify. I want to explain, like you said, I want to justify. But I think what I've realized is that what I'm looking for, especially lately, is clarity. I really want to be clear on what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what I'm doing it for. And I realized that clarity doesn't come through just purely explaining yourself. Clarity doesn't come from that. It doesn't come to the situation. So sometimes what I've realized lately is that it comes through exposure. Composure, sorry. It comes through composure. The moment I compose myself, the clarity comes. In the past, I would have thought, but if I just get my point across, if that person can just understand, if they just know my heart, then they're going to understand and clarity is going to come. It's not. It comes through for me, I've seen it comes through the composure, then I get clarity. That's how I've had to do it. And if you think about it, you defend yourself because out of the fear that you're just trying to protect your good heart and your good intentions and your good reputation. It's actually an attack on your reputation. So you're defending that part, but that doesn't bring that clarity. That composure brings the clarity.
I like the composure part, absolutely. I think it's something that over the years is something I stepped into more often than not. I remember years ago, I used to say, I'm a good person. Like I really am. I'm a good person. I've got good intentions. The one day we were having a braai at my house with some old friends, and the one person asked me, says, why do you justify yourself the whole time? I'm like, what do you mean? He says, like in the entire evening, with your conversations, you would say something, then you would justify it the whole time. And I then realized that, I find myself in these situations where, opposition meets you and you did it with a good intention. And I created this mindset of justifying myself the whole time, defending like you were asking. And so that was me. I was always defending, always justifying, because I believe I'm a good person and you maybe not understanding where I'm coming from. And then after COVID, I read this book from Dr. Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules of Life, The Antidote to Chaos. The very first chapter, he speaks about the lobster and what happens with the lobster when it defends its territory or when it's in a fight. When a lobster loses a fight, his brain diminishes. It's like it disintegrates. And he then develops or grows another brain. But that second brain, or the other brain that he grows, is now grown from the perspective of I've lost. And he said that if a lobster has been defeated in a fight, very seldom will it ever attempt to fight again, because it has now this mindset of I'm at the bottom of the food chain. And he said so many times it's the same in human behavior when we've been through a tough relationship, a tough, romantic relationship, and you got hurt, and it was just terrible. You take on a diminishing form and mindset. And when I read that, I was like, no way. There's no way that I'm going to take on this mindset, this methodology, this concept that I now have about myself. Because I think at the end of the day, it comes down to your own perception, the way that you see yourself. And if you see yourself as defeated, then you are going to find yourself in those situations. I saw myself as a good person, just in the wrong position, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. And that is what was happening the whole time. And it was like, no way, I'm no longer going to have that type of mindset. Therefore, I am going to compose myself, find clarity, and then realize if I'm in the right, then I'm going to stand my ground. If I'm in the wrong, then apologize and we move on.
I think one of the most dangerous things we can do when we are under pressure is that we filter that information through the fear that we are feeling. Because you feel when opposition finds you, if I think about the feelings that you feel, threatened, you feel fear, anxiety, insecurity. Those are the things that's going through your mind. And if you're going to be filtering the information through that lens, well, that's exactly then what the response is going to be. Because let's take fear as an example. If you have fear, it's going to come through in your tone of voice. So fear will distort your tone. You will sound fearful, and it will come across like that. The fear will fill the gaps. I like to talk about assumptions, and my husband and I learned this many years ago, that assumptions or assume makes an ass of you and me. So you don't assume, because that's exactly what it stands for. So when you're assuming and when you're full of fear, that the fear assumes what the motives is of the other person. And most of the time you're completely wrong about what you thought, because you assumed that that person's motive was this and that and the other. So once your filter becomes fear, once the filter becomes anxiety and anything negative, then your neutral actions, a plain simple thing, will also feel like an attack at the end of the day. So fear is actually not going to change your situation or help you in any way. It will just change. It will just actually, it's mirroring how you see yourself and how you're feeling in that moment. So I think going back to composure, you have to compose yourself.
I think you mentioned a couple of important things for us to see. The crux of what you're talking about is understanding your identity, knowing who you are. If you don't know who you are, you don't know what you carry, therefore you will always respond in the lesser way.
Yeah.
Whole conversation we should have about that on another show. And Dr. J, what you're talking about is our perspective that influences our behavior. And I love what you said. The fear is actually just mirroring the way that you see yourself. The truth is, and we've said it on a previous show, we don't know the full story. We don't have the full perspective. Dr. J, you've said in a previous show as well, like me, you would like to, if you could have anything, it would be perspective. It would be to see the whole picture, to know the whole thing, not know everything, but to see the whole, everything that is attached to the situation. And I'm very much the same. But because we have such a limited perspective as human beings, we then think the little bit of information that we know, because your brain makes meaning out of things, the little bit of information that we know, we suddenly make up the story for ourselves. That's the storytelling part of our brain. And we then think that that story that we've conjured up ourselves, by the way, is the absolute truth. And it's not. For me, when those kind of things happen, I kind of just take a step back and I always ask myself, is this the truth? Or is this what I'm telling myself? Because those two things are not the same. And you're correct. Every time we respond out of fear, we're going to tell ourselves the negative thing, the thing that tells you who you are. And if you're unaware of it, you'll play into the victim mindset. But the minute you become aware of it, and I really hope that after today, you at least what happens when things happen to you, what do you tell yourself? Because awareness is the first step to creating a better you, to creating the you that acts out of response, not out of.
I definitely believe awareness plays a vital key. Absolutely. I can definitely attest to that. You have to be aware, like you said, about who you are, that identity. It plays a vital role. So I just wanted to just affirm that I do agree awareness is absolutely key.
So having said that, how do you tell the difference between a moment that requires you to be courageous and need to do versus one that requires you to restrain yourself?
You
I
mentioned
think you have
earlier,
to.
after you.
I think there are moments where you have to ask yourself this question, and quite frankly, I don't think moments. I think every single time you face a situation like this, you have to ask yourself this question. Am I trying to win the argument, or am I trying to protect the outcome, maybe even the future? So the perspective, like we said now, the full story. Because sometimes being right will cost you more than being wise about a situation. So I think that's the thing that I fall back onto is like, and we joke about that in our home a lot, that with my husband and I, he always says that you're probably the only wife that doesn't have to be right. And I said to him, I really just don't have to be right. It means nothing to me. So am I trying to win this argument, or am I trying to protect the outcome? Because sometimes if you think about the bigger picture, this perspective that we spoke about now, you might win the argument, but it's going to cost you the entire purpose, the entire assignment. So that's the things that I fall back onto. You don't always have to be right. You don't always even have to win. But think about the perspective, the bigger picture, because sometimes winning the argument can cost you your assignment.
So true. Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned earlier, Odette, about reading the room. And I think that's key. You got to read the room and then know your place. There are times that it is expected of you to speak up. It is expected of you, to challenge. It's expected of you because that's your place. That's your position. And then other times, exactly, is this worth fighting for? I think Dr. Janine's got the saying, is it in Afrikaans, is it a spiersaak or is it a ruggraat saak? Is it a muscle or is it backbone? Is it a structural thing? And so that's absolutely key. I worked with a client a couple of years ago that he constantly yes, what he did. He would always apologize for things that goes wrong within his department, whether it was his fault or not just his department, within the company. He would just always apologize. Like he would be the first to say, sorry. And so what happened is with that mindset, and Jordan Peterson actually mentions this in his book, he says, never apologize for something you haven't done wrong, because you take on that victim mindset. And so what happened with this person that I was coaching is within his organization, he got pulled into everybody's chaos. And because he was always apologizing, it was almost like he was the scapegoat. If anything went wrong, if the room just paused for like 2 seconds, he was like, I'm sorry, I apologize. And what has happened is he became named and framed as the problem for most things. And as a matter of fact, this person has immense wisdom and problem-solving ability, but nobody in the organization saw him that way, because you always assumed or always, took on the role of my fault. I'm responsible because I'm a nice person. So absolutely, you got to read the room. You got to know your place, because, if there's an opposition, that means there's going to be a restraint. And so who's going to give? Who's going to give the higher ground? And maybe I'm saying this from my perspective and where I'm at. I believe that, I'm a leader within the areas where I'm at, and there's a certain responsibility, to fight for people. I need to take care of the people that's within my charge. I need to take care of those that are under my authority. And so that would be my premise. Read the room, know your place. And then if you have to fight, then let's buckle up, And I'm not saying it needs to be nasty. I mean, you got to stand your ground. It's like the situation with us here at home. I wasn't nasty with the contractor. As a matter of fact, I mean, he left here smiling. He's like, Christo's the best guy ever. It wasn't like we were fighting. But I said my say. I was like, I'm not happy with this. The quality, X, Y, Z. And how are you going to fix it? What are you going to do to prepare this? I'm going to come back. We're going to send more people.
I think something that you said now, that is, if that it can actually, and you can reframe it the exact way that you said it, but if you keep taking that back seat, you're going to take on that victim mentality. That is a huge thing. I think so many people do that.
Yeah, and it's because we want to be nice, and we want to be respectful, and we want to be all those things. And I'm absolutely not saying be disrespectful. I'm not saying that challenge authority, but I am saying you need to know who you are. I was even thinking this morning, as I was driving to drop Christo off at school, I was just thinking about, the podcast and the possible questions that might be thrown at us. We only get the title. Like, this thing can go 4 directions. So I was just running through my mind some scenarios, knowing Odette the way I know her. I was like, it's gonna come from different areas. But I was thinking about Jesus. He seldom defended himself in certain things, but the times when he was challenged on his identity, he spoke up. And I think there's so much value in that. There were many times when he withdrew from the crowds. He went to a solitary place. There's times the Bible says where they tried to kill him and, he slipped away. But then when they challenged, when the devil challenged his identity, if you are the Son of God, what did he do? He stood up. And I think this is something I've learned, and I thank Dr. Peterson, and for him writing that book and me reading that very first chapter, speaking about that lobster, I realized it was me. I was walking around with this defeated mindset, taking responsibility for other people's mistakes and making it my own. And now I feel incompetent, that I can't do X, Y, Z, where if you would ask me point blank, I would volunteer for that position because I know I'm able. But because of the environment and because of situations and because of circumstances, I take on this mindset that you're defeated. I heard this, somebody said this as well, I can't remember who, speaking about marriage. And he's like, if you want to win an argument, it's like, you're in the wrong place. Marriage is not about winning and losing. You're on the same team. You're on the same team. And so many times I see married couples, whether it's the wife or the husband, you can see they're walking defeated because they've lost so many battles in that marriage, and they've assumed this mindset of I'm inferior. They've taken that position, and it's almost impossible. If you read that book, Dr. Peterson says for that lobster, it's impossible for him to ever beat any lobster that has never been defeated.
That's crazy. Even I can use the example of marriage too, is Odette, I'm going to give you a chance just now. It came through a little bit late there. Where my husband and I have this rule is that when we have to get to any conclusion, is I have an opinion, you have an opinion. Neither of us is right. It's only right when it comes together. That's the solution. So I want to hear what you've got to say. He has to hear what I got to say. And then we put that together. That's the actual solution. And it's really worked so well for us that I brought that even into business, because what it was teaching me is that opposition doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that you've lost. It just simply means that you've crossed a threshold that you haven't been at before. The question that you have to ask yourself is not, why is this happening to me? Because that's that victim mentality that Pastor C is speaking about. Why is this happening to me? The better question you need to ask is, what is this trying to form within me? I always ask the question, what am I going to take out of this? What am I going to be able to move forward with from this? And I think that opposition is not a bad thing. I've said many times, and I think you guys heard me last year say many times, that I'm choosing the hard option. And sometimes that is opposition. because opposition reveals what still needs to mature on the inside of us.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Prosti, I want to backtrack. And I'm going to throw such a devil's advocate question. 100% devil's advocate. I know. So, what then is your response to the concept of extreme ownership that says everything is your responsibility? You should have.
I haven't read Extreme Ownership. I know about the book. I know about the author. Just frame it for me in the sense of you're playing devil's advocate. So what statement that I made that you want to challenge?
Debate, not challenge.
I know we're not challenging one another here. We're debating. I want to have clarity on what is the thing, because I do think that your question holds a lot of value. And if I think I know where you're going, about ownership and taking responsibility, everything lies on me. And I just want to be clear that I don't give advice to somebody that might not be adequate.
I hear the victim mentality mindset. I with Jordan Peterson on like that's a problem. The client that you had that took responsibility for everyone's mess ups was, I'm sorry, we'll fix it, right? Extreme ownership started long before the book, by the way. It's like great that a guy wrote a book about it. But extreme ownership says if you are in it, you are responsible for it. So if you're in the room, whatever happens in the room is your responsibility. You could manage the conversation. You could read the room. You could damper the fight. You could, and you absolutely should, because that's what extreme ownership is. Extreme ownership is that you never walk in as a victim, and that everything is within your power, within your means, and within your whatever to fix. Now, those are two opposite sides of the same coin, and I would argue in this case that they are opposing views of the same thing. The one says, I am responsible even when I'm not, on paper. And the other one says, that's not my circus, it's not my monkeys.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so here's what I've seen, and I'll back it up with obviously the scenario is that, have you ever heard the statement, I take full responsibility? I take full responsibility. How do I know you take responsibility? One thing, behavior. Is your behavior matching up with you saying I take responsibility? Because saying I take full responsibility means that you're going to ensure that from this day forward, whatever it is that needs to be fixed, I'm going to fix it. And I haven't seen that happen, which then tells me that person didn't take responsibility. It was simply a cop-out, because taking responsibility and taking ownership, there needs to be a behavior that comes with it. And the behavior was always that victim mindset of, here it is. And the moment the person would say this, you would say that the people would let go of the argument. They would just, that's fine, okay, he takes responsibility. Yet nothing gets done. And so I do think that for me, taking responsibility and saying that I'm in the room, I'm responsible, there needs to be a behavior shift. Secondly, saying that I'm in the room, therefore I'm responsible. My point of view is the following, and I've worked with organizations and with companies where I saw this, and I think I mentioned this at one of our collectives last year. I don't per se like that mentality that you're in the room, therefore you're responsible. You saw the need, now it's your problem. And the reason I'm saying that is I've found most cases that excuse the language, it's a cop-out for leaders and people leading the organization that don't want to address certain things. So they wait for somebody to raise their hands, and then that person becomes responsible. And so if I'm always the person seeing mistakes or seeing, flaws, then I become responsible for everything. And I do believe that we have the ability to see a problem. We don't per se have the answer or the solution, but we do have the ability to see the problem. Therefore, it makes us automatically responsible to solve the problem. I don't agree with that in the full spectrum of you see it, you're responsible. I think there needs to be a conversation, on that. When it comes to ownership, there's 4 things that I look at. Is what is my role? Because your role determines your responsibility. What am I responsible for? If I'm responsible for this, then I need to have the same equal authority in making decisions that can bring a result for the thing I'm responsible for. And then fourthly is I need somebody that can hold me accountable, that I can obviously have, a reporting line of accountability loop to ensure that I don't step out of my authority, but I do have enough authority to fulfill the responsibility that I have because this is my role. And so then I'm going to come to that. If I'm in the room and it's not my role, then how can it be my responsibility? And if you make it my responsibility, but not give me the authority to make decisions, and this is what I found in that scenario where you saw the problem, therefore, you're now responsible. Highly unlikely does that person that now has been given the responsibility ever have the authority to make decisions that will bring a change in behavior.
That's really good.
That's a 10 out of 10 response for Sissy. Well done. That was that's where the
We
off-topic
debated. Come on, you gotta
point comes in
gotta
play.
hit some.
No, well, look, I don't buy into the extreme responsibility thing because, let me rephrase. The earlier version of me was extreme ownership, extreme responsibility. You're here, you need to fix it, it's your problem. And I would jump in and save and fix, and it profits nothing. That sounds terrible, but it's true. So I have gone on a journey where it comes down to identity. Knowing who you are, knowing the authority that you carry. I don't carry the authority of the traffic officer. Therefore, when the guy next to me is speeding, I can't pull him over and say, "Excuse me, sir. Here's a little fine for you because you were speeding." It's not my authority. Yes, it's wrong. Yes, he's breaking the law, but that's not my aisle mate. Now I sound like the Bunnings people. It's taken me a long time to get to the point of understanding that you don't have to fix everything. And just because you see that it's wrong doesn't mean it's yours to fix. Sometimes there is an avenue to say these things need to be addressed and you can escalate it and address it in that way. But I don't rescue people anymore. I let it burn. I didn't in the past. And the reason I asked the question is because I think there's a lot of people listening that are in that catch-22. Do I let it burn or do I save? Because if on the one hand I save, then it's my responsibility and I'm so sorry and I'm going to fix it because we feel like it makes us look humble. I think that's what it comes down to. It makes you look humble. You're not. You become the doormat, which is exactly what you've described. And the flip side of that is when you say, well, actually that's not for me to carry, then people often view that as opposition in that, jy's nou stroppie. Sorry, for the English people, I don't know how to say that. You are being argumentative or, you're not a team player. Neither of those.
I agree with that. I'll maybe just throw in this, that, you're speaking about the traffic officer. I think that's a brilliant analogy because I've driven so many times down the road and I'm like, I want to give that guy a fine because he's cutting through traffic. When it comes to our son, well, before we had him, we would visit friends and I would not agree or I would see something that their kids are doing wrong. Didn't mean I had the authority to correct it. Yet I saw that there was something that they did wrong. And even now, so I've seen many times that visiting friends, they will sometimes like bite on their lip. When my son does something, they don't correct him because it's not their child, it's not their authority. Now listen, my friends have full authority, and they know that, to discipline my child. If he's at their house and he breaks their rules that I'm not aware of, they have the authority to know because I trust my friends. I know them. I know their kids. And so, different conversation, but I do think that it brings a good example to your point as well, is that the the framework of, you saw the problem, it's your responsibility. I don't agree with it. I think it forms dysfunctional teams. And here's what it's hiding. It hides the lack of ownership of the leader. Because a true leader will, say true leader, sometimes saying others are not true. But a self-aware leader will quickly realize when somebody brings up a solution that's outside of their scope of authority, but it's wisdom. And it will give that answer or that solution to the responsible person, say, with that information. Or, you know what, Janine, great discovery there. I want you to work with Odette. Odette, work with Janine and fix that problem. That is your responsibility, Odette, but I'm giving you assistance. I can't say that I've heard that type of scenario play out in organizations. And I think, well, for me, that is where it's at. You as the leader need to have that discernment to say, okay, boom, 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 put the things together, and there we go. If we look at sport, have you ever seen a forward, a prop, kick for post because Andre Pollard was a little bit late, or he saw that, there's an opportunity? Does he tackle somebody that's in somebody else's channel when the guy's going to score a try? Fair enough, absolutely. There are times where we save and we don't let the thing burn. But I'm also of the same mind as you, Odette, is that sometimes I think it should burn. Because then you're going to realize what the problem is.
I want to just add, not only does that highlight lacking leadership, but it's highlighting the lack of accountability within leadership. It's to hold people accountable requires courage. It requires an understanding of your identity for the authority that you carry. And we need to be okay with saying, you didn't do X, Y, Z. It's great that someone else has a solution for you, but the responsibility for implementing the solution still remains yours. Good leaders are clear, they're consistent, and they hold themselves and others accountable without the fear of it becoming an issue and you're not being a team player. That is gaslighting. Like, you're not being a team. That's gaslighting. That's not leadership. And to do that to people, I think, is disgusting. So just to your point, it's about accountability or the lack thereof, which is what then plays out in those teams.
You think, the way you've explained it now, do you think that the lack of accountability, is it also possible that that leader is not so much concerned about being the leader versus being liked?
Which,
therefore, they don't address the things that's going to make them look like the nasty person.
Which comes down to identity, right? If you don't know who you are, what role you play, and what authority that role carries, and how to steward it, it's stewardship, it's not ownership.
I agree. It comes down to the identity. And maybe you're in that place that opposition has found you lately. And I think what we take from the conversation today is that you don't have to, in that opposition, become a harder person. You don't have to become quieter. You don't have to step back. You don't need to become somebody else that you've been all along because of this opposition. You need to stay in your lane, and Pastor C can speak a lot about that. But I think another thing is that opposition doesn't mean you need to stop in your tracks. It actually means that in this moment, you have to stay grounded in your identity, the person that you've been all along, the real person. And that is going to help you to move forward in a positive and healthy way. I think a lot of people lose themselves in opposition. They've worked so hard up to this point to be this kind of person, and then they lose everything coming back to composure, composing yourself. So opposition doesn't mean you need to stop. Doesn't mean you need to become harder, quieter, or anybody else. It just means stay grounded, compose yourself, remember who you are in that moment, and that will be able to help you to move forward in a healthy way.
And that's powerful. Don't step back, step in. I like that. That is brilliant. That is brilliant.
So that's exactly the goal this year. The goal is not to avoid opposition. It's to respond in a way that you can live with afterwards. And that's off topic, on point this year. We're not in the perfect answers. We are learning to ask better questions. Thank you, Dr. J and Pastor C, for your insights and contributions today, and for wrestling on the topic of what happens when you meant well, but it went wrong anyway. And for those of you who are listening, if this sparked something for you, leave us a comment, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Share this with your friends because they need to hear this. We've all been in that space. Until next time, bye for now. Opposition isn't something to avoid, and it isn't always something to fight. What matters is how you respond, in a way that you can live with afterwards. If there's one thing we hope you take from this conversation, it's this. Opposition doesn't mean you need to become harder or quieter or someone you're not. It means staying grounded in who you really are, composing yourself, reading the room, and knowing when to step back and when to step in. Because identity, not reaction, determines your response. Thank you, Dr. Janine de Cabo and Pastor Christo Pretorius, for the honesty, wisdom, and real-world insight they brought into this conversation. And to you, listening, if this episode stirred something, challenged something, or named something you've been sitting with, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, send us a message, or share this episode with someone who needs it. This is Off Topic, On Point, where we're learning to ask better questions so that we can respond with clarity, courage, and integrity. We'll see you in the next conversation.